Just about every reseller, including myself, says that you should be listing things daily, otherwise your sales will die. So I decided to do a little experiment in February and I completely stopped listing on eBay, on Poshmark, and on Depop. I didn't even refresh old listings. And you wanna know what happened? My sales dropped by 32%. But overall, I actually ended up making more money, and I'll tell you why. Before I get started, if you are new here, my name is Taylor Jo, and I started reselling on eBay about a year and a half ago to make a little bit of extra income, and I decided to document my journey from the beginning here on YouTube. Well, now it has somehow turned into my full-time job, and I now list across 4 different platforms: eBay, Poshmark, Depop, and most recently, Whatnot. If reselling content is your jam, please subscribe. I don't think you'll be disappointed. All right, let's get into it. You wanna know how I stopped listing, lost 32% of my sales, and still made more money? Well, here's the truth. It wasn't that listing didn't matter, it's that where I put my time mattered more. Let me show you what I actually mean. First, I wanna break down what happened on the platforms where I stopped listing. Then I'll show you what happened on the platform where I decided to shift my time and why the overall result surprised me. If you saw my last month's update video, you would know that across eBay, Poshmark, and Depop, I made around $675. This month, without listing a single new item or refreshing any of my older listings, that dropped to $456. That's a $219 difference and about a 32% decrease in sales, which honestly makes sense. I removed the input, so momentum slowed. I was actually pleased that even though my sales obviously dropped, they didn't completely collapse. Inventory I listed over a year ago was selling, and even some things I listed at the end of 2025. Now, here's where it gets interesting. While my traditional platforms were down 32%, I poured all of that extra time and energy into Whatnot, and it paid off in the form of a 53% increase in sales. In the entire month of February, my earnings on Whatnot, which is the amount that goes into my bank account, not the gross amount, were $4,532.83, which was almost a $1,500 increase from January. Let's get into the metrics because this is my favorite part. So in February, I had 13 shows, same as January. I do 3 shows a week, so that part makes sense. And I streamed for 41 hours and 32 minutes, which is about 7 hours more than I streamed last month. And get this, I sold 897 items in February, which is 313 more items than I sold in January. I also had an average of 18 buyers per day, which is 6 more than last month. And I gained 724 new followers, which is 160 more than I did in January. My max concurrent viewers also increased, but this was due to a raid, just like it was last month. So this isn't really a useful metric, but I'll mention it anyways. It was 56 when last month's was 45. I wish there was a way to see average concurrent viewers because I know for a fact this increased as well. If you don't know what concurrent viewers mean, it just means the amount of viewers that are in your show at any given time. The entire month of February, it was abnormal for me to have less than 20 viewers in my show in the middle of any of my shows, you know, with viewers always kind of decreasing by the end of my show. But I was able to raid with about 12 to 15 people every show. So I was able to send that many people to somebody else's show by the end of my show, which I'm really proud of. And even though that's an invisible metric, I feel like it's still very worth mentioning. I mean, I literally used to have like 2 or 3 people in my show, and now again, it's kind of coming to a point where it's abnormal for me to have less than 20 people in my show for the majority of my show. And sometimes, especially in the beginning of my show, when there's like a surge, I'll get like 30 plus people in my show, which is just wild to me. Now, this is my favorite metric, and I like to share this because it goes really well with the first episode of my Whatnot series, which I'll touch on a little bit later, about having regular buyers, return buyers, and building a community. My favorite metric for February was my biggest spender, so the buyer that bought the most from me, bought 104 items from me and spent $689 in my shows alone just in the month of February. And we're already, I think today's the 4th day of March as I'm filming this. That buyer has already come back in March and bought more stuff from me. So if that does not prove to you that the first video in my Whatnot Hack series is so freaking important, and I'll link that up here and at the end of the video, I don't know what does. My regulars are truly helping me pay the bills, and I could not be more grateful. And to be honest, even though that was a lot, my next highest spender spent like $400 something, and then the one after that was like $300. So I'm just like so grateful for these women because holy crap. Anyways, this experiment taught me something really important about how I run my business. Listing absolutely drives sales growth, but time is a limited resource, and sometimes focusing on the highest ROI activity matters more than maintaining activity everywhere. And no, this is not me quitting eBay. This was just an experiment, and experiments are meant to teach you something. I actually love that side of my business. I love sourcing clothing at the bins. I love flipping things that I paid $1 for and 10 timesing my profits. You've maybe heard the phrase, sometimes a quick dime is better than a slow dollar. And for me, Whatnot has been the quick dime lately. Faster inventory turnover, faster cash flow, faster momentum, and it's just hella fun. But here's the thing. Why not build a business where I can make the quick dime and the slow dollar at the same time? Whatnot gives me speed. eBay and the other platforms give me long-term stability. One is fast cash flow, the other is compounding inventory. My goal isn't to replace one with the other. I'm building a system where I can do both. It doesn't take me 40 hours a week to run the Whatnot side of my business. I do 3 shows a week, and yes, there's work outside of that. Sourcing, packing, setting up, breaking down, but it's not a full-time 40-hour commitment by itself. So when I'm not working on Whatnot, that is when I'm typically working on eBay, except for last month. If you've seen my 5-minute listing video, which I'll link up here, you know that I don't sit and list for hours every single day. I take one day, once a week, sometimes every 2 weeks, and I photograph and skew a bunch of inventory. And then after that, most days I'm spending maybe 15 minutes listing a few items a day. Add in sourcing clothing and the couple of minutes it takes for me to pack any of the orders I get, and suddenly you've built a full 40+ hour work week. But it's balanced and it's diversified and it's intentional. And that also kind of doesn't include the time I spend right here on YouTube, which is actually a kind of third prong of my business, but it is also the one that brings in the least amount of income. I'll be fully transparent with you guys, and I've actually never really shared this before, but YouTube is definitely my creative outlet and I love being here. But last year I only made like $1,500 total on YouTube if you combine AdSense and brand deals and things like that. So it is very much a side hustle income. So at least for now it is. I hope someday that it becomes something bigger, but for now it's very much side hustle. So I just wanted to let you guys know that in case you think that I'm just like rolling in the dough as a YouTuber. Definitely not. In fact, most YouTubers, even the ones that have 100,000 followers, are not making a lot of money on AdSense, especially. Like AdSense does not make that much money. I'm lucky if I make like $100 in a month on AdSense. So anyways, this last month of February was not about abandoning platforms. It was literally about proving that I can shift my focus when I need to and then shipped back when I'm ready. All right, I did want to spend a good portion of today's video talking about this because that is the entire point of my channel, sharing the real decisions behind the numbers, not just the numbers themselves. That said, because I intentionally stepped back from listing this month, I didn't sell very much across those platforms. So the what sold portion of this video that I include in every single one of my update videos is going to be shorter than usual. But with that being said, let's take a look at what did move. And as always, we will start with eBay. All right, the first thing was this J. Crew brand tiered linen dress. We are going into spring and people are starting to buy their spring wardrobe, so definitely be prepared for that. I got this at the bins in November for just over $1 and it sold for $10. And the biggest surprise on this one was it did not sell via promoted listings, but it was promoted. So in my last update video, I told you guys that every single one of my promoted listings sold via promoted listings. So I got charged eBay's wonderful promoted listings fee for every single sale. But this month, I had one thing that didn't. So anyways, the next one is a bolo. I mentioned this in my last update video, my last what sold video, I should say, but this brand, Alpaca, A-L-P-A-K-A, is a brand you want to be on the lookout for. I bought 4 of these on Whatnot for $6 each from a liquidator Whatnot seller. And this one sold within a month for $48. And I did not promote these at all because I knew that they would sell without being promoted. So definitely keep that in mind with eBay's new promoted listings policy. If you've got something that definitely doesn't need to be promoted because the sell-through rate is like 300%, then don't use it because it will charge you that stupid percentage. All right, next up, another vintage 2002 Elmo plushie. This one was not one of the like singing and dancing ones, but this was in that bundle that I got from that lady on Facebook Marketplace with all of the vintage Elmos for $3.50 and it sold for $10. Just a lot of low ROI items this month, you guys. This vintage swag Rolling Stones jacket I've had for a really long time, a full year. I bought it at the thrift store in January of 2025 for $5 and it finally sold for $20. I thought this was going to sell for a lot more, but apparently swag is not a like well-known vintage brand, but the jacket itself was super cool. It was a nice lightweight quilted jacket with a big Rolling Stones, not big, with the Rolling Stones like iron-on patch on it, and it was just so cool. All right, next up, this Eddie Bauer XL Tall Henley knit sweater, which I'm assuming did not do well because it was an XL Tall and people don't search for that very much. I've also had this since January of 2025 and I bought it for $5 and it sold for $12.49. Blech. I'm happy to be making money, but geez, some of these just did not flip for much. Speaking of, these Denim & Co. pull-on pants, I've sold these before. I had multiple pairs of them. I bought a bunch of clothing from Daily Refinement on Whatnot. They had a bunch of QVC bundles that I purchased in August of last year. Every item was under $4. These pants flipped for $8.50. The first pair I sold for more than that, but because I was not listing this month and I knew I was going to be selling less, I was just accepting literally all offers. I'm like, I don't even care how much it is, like just help me refresh my inventory, let's go. This one is interesting. This is a Wrangler pearl snap bodysuit, like a onesie, and I call it a bodysuit because eBay told me that I can't use the word onesie in my listing, which I thought was really weird. Turns out that onesie is a Gerber like copyrighted term. Like you can't use the word onesie, but I don't know a single person who doesn't use the word onesie when talking about these baby items. So that's just something to know. You cannot use the word onesie unless it is Gerber brand. But this was a Wrangler pearl snap onesie. I'm gonna call it a onesie because that's what it is. And I never knew that Wrangler did the pearl snaps with onesies and I thought it was really cool. So this one was a great flip actually. So I got this at the bins in November for just over $1 and it flipped for $20 and this thing weighed nothing. So like realistically speaking, this was probably a few cents to source. So next up, you guys will appreciate this one. This is a vintage Sea Palms Six Flags polo, and I got this from Rally Roots Whatnot Show. I actually won this for free as a giveaway, and it sold for $8.49. This was one where I was watching their show, I won the giveaway, and then I felt guilty for winning the giveaway, so I just bought whatever the next item was. I swiped on it, and it was like a Nicolas Cage movie shirt. I think it was in one of my previous What Sold videos, because I'm pretty sure I sold it around Christmas time. So it was fun to watch Ryan and Allie's show. And if you guys are not familiar with Rally Roots, you probably are, because if you watch my channel, you probably watch the much bigger reseller YouTuber channels, but definitely give them a watch. Their videos are super, super fun to watch. So next up this is a bolo for sure. This brand is called Allie Miles, and it is a plus size brand. This was a cityscape, like artsy tunic. Again, bins in November, so just over $1. And this one flipped for $25.49. The weird thing about this, and I've had this problem with several of my listings on eBay, and eBay came out with this new feature where you can have it automatically decrease the price of your listings over time. And I never, ever select that because I want to be in control of when my listings decrease in price. And I'm almost positive that eBay is turning that feature on without my permission, because I do not list things for something in 49 cents ever. So I have no idea, and I listed this item for a lot more than $25. So I'm really confused as to why this sold for $25.49 when I did not list it for that amount. So if you guys have that issue, or if something like that is happening, please let me know, because if eBay is making these decisions for me, like, that is so wrong, and I would be pissed. Anyways, next up is this Banana Republic. This was a premium luxe yarn sweater. That's what it said on the tag. This was also found in the bins in November for just over $1, and this one sold for $20. I was happy to sell a sweater in the season where we're transitioning into spring. This next one is Eddie Bauer Guide Pro shorts. These ones had a really good sell-through rate on them. I had somebody super, super lowball me on these last year. I totally declined their offer. And I'm glad I did, because these sold for full price. I got them at a thrift store in April of 2025 for $5, and they sold for $30. So these like really high quality like hiking shorts, be on the lookout for sure. All right, next up, this is a brand I've never heard of before. The brand is called Vintage XG, and it is a modern brand that creates things that are meant to look vintage. So it's like 90s themed for sure. This was a crew sweater. I actually bought this at the thrift store in October for $5, and it flipped for $15. I maybe could have gotten more out of it, but again, I was just accepting any and all offers. All right, let's move on to Poshmark. On Poshmark, I sold these Crisp brand, CRYSP, denim jeans. They were like a crazy graphic pair of jeans, and I actually bought these in the very beginning of my reselling journey back in December 2024 at a thrift store for $5. When I looked these up, I distinctly remember being shocked at how much these jeans sell for brand new on their website. It's like hundreds of dollars. So I was like, for sure, definitely gonna sell these. You know, this was before I understood sell-through rate and all that jazz, but they still sold for $22. So I am very proud of that. Next up are, again, another thing that I purchased on that same thrift trip in December 2024. This Mia brand, which is a shoe brand that I actually wear myself. They usually sell their shoes and stuff at like Marshall's. These were called Jeanette Camo Ballet Flats. And this was an interesting one. I bought them for $5. I sold them for $11. I've had them for forever. I did not care how much they sold for. And the person that bought them from me immediately reposhed them, which means they basically took my listing and all of my listing photos and put it up for sale on their Poshmark. And I've never never had this happen before, and I am not like a Poshmark person. Like, I don't understand Poshmark that well. I'm still kind of trying to figure it out and all that. So I knew that you could like re-posh stuff because I've bought things from Poshmark and I've had it ask me like, oh, do you want to resell this? And it's like, well, no, but I didn't realize that they could use all of your listing photos, which I don't know, something about that, like, it doesn't bother me, but it surprises me that that is allowed. Like, those are my photos. Like, what if it was a photo of me as like the model wearing the clothing item or something, and they just like reposhed it using my photo? You know what I mean? Tell me how you guys feel about reposhing, because it's like, I don't know, I just found it surprising that it's even allowed. And also just like absolutely zero work goes into that. You could buy something from anybody on Poshmark and reposh it. So maybe I'm in the wrong business. Maybe I need to start sourcing on Poshmark and just relisting people's listings and trying to sell it for more. I don't know. The whole thing just seems really sketchy to me. Like, I'm not offended they bought them from me for $11. I'm so glad to see them go, and I still made a little bit of a profit, but like, I don't know. The whole concept just seems really weird to me. Anyways, next up from the bins was this vintage Herman Geist. I don't know how to pronounce the word, Geist. This was a wool wrap skirt. And again, I paid just over $1 for this at the bins in November, and that one sold for $21. Next up after that were these Wrangler cowboy cut jeans. I actually thrifted these in February 2025, so a full year ago, and I actually thrifted two of the exact same pair of these jeans. They were hanging on the rack right next to each other. They had a good sell-through rate at the time, so I grabbed them, $5 each, and this one sold for $18. Next up, this is maybe a bolo, but this was a vintage 90s Lapis brand boho dress, and very, very 90s vibes with this one, with the cute little fold over, brown in color, embroidery all over. Got that in the bins for just over $1, and it flipped for 22. And lastly for Poshmark, this Women with Control brand, which is a QVC brand. This was from my QVC bundles from Daily Refinement. Under $4, flipped for 12. And the funny thing about this one is, if we move to what we sold on Depop, the very first thing I sold on Depop was also this dress, because I had multiples of them. So I sold this dress again in a different size, and this one sold for $17 on Depop, and I made so much more money on this one because Depop doesn't have any seller fees. So it sold for more and no seller fees. Next up on Depop, these Palladium Revolt High shoes, brand new in box. This was also a Daily Refinement thing. This was one of their shows where you bid on a chance to win something. So, and I happened to win. So this was my first time bidding on their show at all. I think I bid $19 or something like that, and I ended up winning 5 pairs of Palladium shoes. So overall, each pair cost me $6, and these ones sold for $34. I have not sold any of the other pairs, and I've had them listed for a while. So don't think this is a bolo at all, but they're super cute. I kept a pair for myself, and I really like these shoes. I think they're awesome, but definitely not a bolo. I don't think people are looking for these. Next up is this pair of Tony Hawk cargo shorts. If you guys have been following me for a while and watching my what sold videos, I don't know what it is about the Tony Hawk brand. I find it all of the time, and it always sells really well. But this one I found in July for just under $2 that day at the bins. I must have picked up heavier stuff that day, and it only sold for $12.74. They were not in the best condition, and it was also the first Tony Hawk thing I ever picked up. But in the past, I've sold like Tony Hawk shirts and pants and things like that, and they usually sell pretty quickly. Just make sure it's in good condition, and always check sell-through rate on every kind of item. All right, next up is this Wild Fable micro skort, super cute studded little Western kind of festival skort. So this I got from Whatnot when I was buying case packs of clothing specifically to sell on Whatnot when I was selling clothing. If you are not aware, this is a little quick update. I am no longer selling clothing on Whatnot, at least for now, because it's just not economical for me right now when I don't have the space for the clothing. So I'm not really sure how much I paid specifically per item, but it was probably under $5 a piece. This one flipped for $18, which was full price. So I'm really surprised that it sold for full price because I was offering half price on these, but hey, I'll take it. Next up, this Japna brand, which is definitely a Bolo brand. I've sold so much Japna stuff as long as it's in good condition and it's, you know, a trending piece or something basic like this. This I bought in the bins in November as well, just over $1. This was just a cute little chiffon peplum top, like just perfect wear for the office, career, anything like that. It sold for $12, but typically when I have something that's Japna that is very like substantial, like a big pair of boho pants or like a bodysuit or something like that, it sells for a lot more than $12. And last but certainly not least, somehow my mom, who is my thrifting buddy, my business partner when she's here in the 6 months that she's here, she's like my ties and blazers and hard goods kind of person. Like she knows how to find that stuff and researches that stuff. So every time we go to the bins, I have her go through the bin of ties that they always have. They always have like a little bin of ties. And she found a Hermes tie, you guys. This was the same day that we found the Donald Trump one from the last video. This was a genuine Hermes tie, so this cost just over $1, and I listed it for $100, purposefully completely highballing it because the price range on these when I was looking up the ties, that first of all I could not find this exact one. Secondly, the price range was like anywhere between $50 to $200 depending on what you had. So I was like, we'll just go in the middle, and I listed it for $100 and just see what happens. And someone on Depop offered me $60, and I was like, hell yeah, $1 to $60, let's go. So obviously Hermes is a Bolo brand. I don't think, you know, that goes without saying. But that was definitely the golden find and the golden flip of February. So I had to save that one for last. So overall, this month really just confirmed a few things for me. Listing absolutely matters. Consistency absolutely matters, but so does being intentional with your time. Shifting focus for a season doesn't mean that you're quitting. It just means that you're prioritizing. For me, February was about leaning into the quick dime, testing my systems, and proving that my business doesn't fall apart if I step back strategically. And now that I have that data, I'm excited to bring clothing back into the mix after spring break and start building both at the same time. And I'll mention this again, if you're interested in the whatnot side of things, I just started a whatnot series. The first episode of the series is already out. I was talking about it earlier, where I am breaking down whatnot hacks. And I started with the most important one, the one that will absolutely change the game for you if you are brand new on whatnot. And that video will be on the end screen somewhere over here or over here. It truly dives into the mindset shift that completely changed how I do my shows and is what launched me into making the income that allowed me to run this experiment in the first place. If you enjoyed this video or are looking forward to the rest of my Whatnot Hack series or the rest of my monthly updates, please consider subscribing, and thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!